session. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Second. Okay, it's been moved and properly second. First item on, we have ordinances on final reading, but for item ordinance 6A, would there like to be any further discussion? Councilwoman Burrs.
Mr. Chair, I have two questions. Number one, Phil, do you have the wording for the ordinance about holding harmless?
Yes, ma'am. I have ordinance amendment language that you requested just a few minutes ago.
Okay.
And that language, at least that you requested in the strategic planning hearing, was to see if we could have an alternate version of the ordinance requesting a provision that the District Management Corporation will hold harmless and indemnify the city from any liability from any provision of services within the district boundaries by the District Management Corporation.
Hit your button, please, again.
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Burrs, would you hit your button again, please?
Hit the button again?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I was trying to switch you to.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if for any of their behavior,
Yes.
now what about holding the council harmless for passing this ordinance where there could be any constitutional questions of inequity?
You didn't mention that before.
I'm mentioning it now.
It's the provision of hold the city harmless from any liability for provision of services that they provide is pretty broad. Are you wanting them to hold the city harmless for just passing the ordinance that is allowed by state law?
I believe that we are held harmless because we're doing our duty. I just want to make that very clear, or if you would read that into the record.
What?
A council can act, all right, so I believe the law is that a council can act in its capacity
Yes.
to pass or not pass something and be held, because it's doing its duty,
Sure.
it's held harmless.
And you are immune from actions that you occur in your immunity for the city.
Correct.
And as far as any claim under the Governmental Tort Liability Act, as long as you're in your official capacity and you're doing that as a legislative act, you are immune as a council member.
And does that include any constitutional or governmental acts that might cause any inequity? I know we can get sued by anyone.
Yes.
You can sue them for a menu from Shoney's. What I want to know is there that kind of language, or is there already protection in the law?
I believe you're protected in the law by that already, because you doing things in your official capacity as a council member. The other aspect of this, unless there's some sort of arbitrary or capricious act that you have, that sometimes comes up in our zoning cases, and I'm sure you're aware. In that circumstance, if there can be an establishment that you just do not like an individual and you're passing a law to hurt that individual, that would be the only other claim.
All right, next question. Is this any sort of special interest or class legislation?
No, because it is a general law of the state of Tennessee.
Okay, so I have all that in the record, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Kim? How do you feel about an amendment tonight that, according to state law, would not hold this back another week, that iterates everything we just talked about?
Sure, Councilman, we would have no issue doing anything that would hold council hold harmless. We do believe that you were protected already because it is a separate entity that will have insurance. But if that makes the council feel better about that, that's absolutely fine.
Hold harmless and indemnify was the other word, and
Right.
that's what insurance is for?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Before I get to you, Madam Clerk, we've been discussing an item that I probably jumped ahead on, so would you please read item 6A for the record to reference what these questions and comments have been about?
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code Part 2 by adding a new Chapter 11, Article 21, Downtown Central Business Improvement District, Section 11-525 through 11-534.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilman Gilbert, please.
Just a question, Phil. Phil, say for example, a brick, sidewalks crack, whatever, if someone fall, hurt themselves, who's gonna be reliable? Is the city reliable and the building organization of the bid, or it's just bid and not the city, or is it both?
It depends on whether it resulted by a negligent act or omission of the city or a negligent act or omission of the members of the bid on there. That would be the issue.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Is that it, Councilman Gilbert?
Yes.
Thank you,
For now.
sir. Okay, if there's no further questions, item 6, I'm sorry, okay, we have Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. I see a lot of people in the audience today. I wish you would have been here at 1:30. We went through a whole host of questions about construction of the board, legal issues. We learned today that there is an option B for forming a bid that I find very interesting, just to know more about that. But because we are under state law and because this is following that timeline, it looks like we're not going to have a lot of opportunity to discuss that. And so here we are, and I just wanted to point that out because I see a lot of people here in support of it, and then we did have a lot of legitimate questions I wish you could have heard.
Okay, is that it, Councilman? Yes, sir. Is there anybody else? Okay, at this point, 6B and 6C was read last week. So now we'll move on to resolutions. 8A, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement to exercise option to renew in substantially the form attached with Rivermont Youth Athletic Association, Inc. for the use of property located on the portion of tax map number 118KA009 at 1096 Upton Drive for an additional term of 1 year.
8B, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement to exercise option to renew in substantially the form attached with Lakeside Youth Association, Inc. for the use of property located at tax map number 129CA018 for an additional term of 1 year.
Thank you. 8C, please.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 19 STVR 00044 for property located at 1793 East 12th Street.
Thank you. D, please.
A resolution to amend resolution number 29359 to accept reimbursable funds for the 2018-2019 State of Tennessee Justice Assistant Grant for the continuation of the Beyond School Walls program for a 3-year period with the City of Chattanooga as subrecipient and Big Brothers Big Sisters of Greater Chattanooga as the subcontractor for an amount not to exceed $121,565.
Okay, thank you. Item 8E was read last week. We have no departmental reports today, so I will adjourn this session of the agenda session and turn it over to Chairman Ledford for planning and zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Planning and Zoning for June 4th. Can I get approval for the minutes? And seconded, thank you very much. Dr. Burrs, would you mind if I moved your item F to the top of the agenda if the council has no objection? Yes, ma'am. John, can we go ahead and start with item F if there's no
Sure.
objection from the council? I'm looking around, not seeing any.
If I could have this PDF put up on the screen, please. Let's see here. This is it right here. Okay. This is a request to lift conditions. The site has already been zoned. The request is to lift the following condition: improvement of McCutcheon Road to widen the street to 22 feet from curb to curb from the intersection of Hickory Valley Road to the eastern edge of the subject property. And the applicant's reason for this request, noted in the application, was because the paving requirements in front of the property are not owned by the property owner, and that is creating a hardship. Again, you can see I mean, zoom in a little closer, you see the site in question. The improvements would apply from the intersection all the way to the eastern edge of this property. And I guess what they're concerned, or at least they're expressing their concern about, is the portion of the right-of-way between their western edge of their property and Hickory Valley Road. Just as a reminder, to give some history on this project, it was zoned, a lesser zone, and then it was upzoned to R3MD, subject to conditions. They wanted to increase the number of units on the property, and so the quid pro quo, for lack of a better word, if they're desiring to increase the intensity on that site was, well, if you're adding more units than what this road can handle, then there's a condition that was added to improve the road to handle the load from those added units, which they agreed to at the time of rezoning. So this gives you a little bit of the background of that case. Here you can see the site, which it looks like it's already under development. Looking at the zoning again, you can see the site is zoned R3MD. Immediately to the east, still R1. There was a large project that was zoned to apartments. You see that R3 zone further to the west for an apartment complex. There's also requirements to improve McCutcheon Road for that project. Again, I'm not going to go back to the history. I just kind of covered the history for you on the zoning for this site. That was the condition that they're wanting to have lifted. Staff, again, noted that this condition was put in place as part of that rezoning request, and it was, again, since they're asking for the opportunity to increase the amount of intensity on the site, we felt like that condition was warranted to ensure the infrastructure met the needs going with the development. So therefore, we're recommending to deny. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. Planning Commission, after hearing from the applicant and staff's recommendation, concurred with staff to deny the request.
Yeah? So I understood from Planning Commission that the Planning Commission didn't want to overturn something that City Council had put on previously.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing research on what we had put on previously.
Sure.
And what we had put on previously was relative to the density. Is the density still the same?
As I understand it, that has not changed.
That has not changed. Okay. So here's my problem. How can we require somebody to put something on property that's not theirs?
Right.
I think that maybe that was quickly done and probably incorrectly done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all a fan for widening roads and doing all that.
Right.
The people, if you'll put the thing back up,
You
that
good?
showed a more graphic.
You show the condition or the pictures of the site?
No, the picture that showed the piece from Hickory Valley, it was a schematic.
This one right here?
Yeah, all right. So right in front of their property, they're doing the road widening and the sidewalk, which is kind of what we've been doing all along Brainerd Road.
Right.
Hoping that it'll connect. But between Hickory Valley and that property, they don't even own the property. They can't condemn, they can't, it's an impossible task. So I'm trying to figure out, what's that thinking?
Which can be done, I've seen this done, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong on this, see it out here? Is that the applicant will give funds to the city to acquire the right-of-way. Like I think for the Hillock Farm situation, we had something similar where there need to be, so it's not, is it common? No, but there is a method by which it can happen. You're right, it's an awkward situation, but the way that's handled, in my understanding, is that the applicant would provide the city with the funds to acquire the right-of-way, and basically they're providing whatever the cost to do that is given to the city to make that happen, unless I'm mistaken. I'm going to lean on Phil and Blythe on that. But it's not common, but it has been done, where you've got an intersection that's not immediately abutting a property that also needs some right-of-way to be improved. It's been done before.
Is that not holding the applicant hostage unless you give us the money or?
Well, but they agreed to that as part of the rezoning. I mean, I guess I understand you have to kind of weigh all that in balance, but
Yeah.
they were, they knew going in that this is what the city was asking for in return for them to improve or increase the intensity on that property. Blythe, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just need some help here.
I'll try. There's one thing that I think is, that John didn't indicate. When we were looking for our staff recommendation, we went back and looked. There's one piece of the zoning history that I personally thought was relevant, was the initial zoning change was specific to, I guess it was R1, and they changed it to,
Increase it to R3MD.
they changed it to R3MD. This is prior to 2014, with the
Right.
condition that they would only convert existing structures to residential. So it was an addition of 2 or 3 units. And then when they changed that in 2014 to 30 units or something like that, that was the condition that was negotiated. So it was, as I recall, looking at the history, it was specific that the cap on development was intended to be kept. And so the zoning got changed with that condition, but then when the condition changed, there needed to be some sort of reciprocal act of the developer to mitigate the intensity. That was why that condition was done that way. That's more of a zoning thing. From my perspective, there's a couple of ways to skin the cat on that. As I understand it, developers can negotiate with neighboring property owners. I don't know for sure whether the existing right-of-way can even accommodate. It's possible the existing right-of-way can accommodate the required expansion without purchasing property. I don't know, because I'm not the engineer or the surveyor on the property.
So what I hear us saying is we put a condition on, for whatever reason, is where there's a fence there and another guy lives in that in order for it to happen, they have to purchase property from somebody else in order to go to Hickory Valley Road?
What I'm saying is I don't know that to be the case. I understand from the applicant that's what they're saying. That may be true. I don't have the survey, and I don't know if that's true. Sometimes the right-of-way that's needed is available to add roadway width.
Okay, so we need to find that out tonight?
It won't be on the agenda until next week.
Huh? I mean, next week? All right, so what I heard from the applicant was that it's not available. It's owned by somebody else and there's a fence there. It's not available. They would have to buy it, but they can't buy it because it's almost like the city would have to take it and then they could put the right-of-way in. It's a little bit convoluted, and I'm not sure that it's not a little strange what we're asking. The other thing is, I didn't hear 30 units. I had heard two quadplexes.
It's changed over time. I'll
If we could kind of have that
pull
cleared
that
up.
I'll shoot you an email on the latest I did know that they increased the number of units, which caused us to say, hey, now they've gone over a threshold. And I do think it's legal, as long as you can require road improvements as long as it's directly linked to the development. And I think in this case, it's what we were seeing is that because they're basically increased the unit to a certain point, you had an substandard road, that they needed to improve that road, not just for their property, because it doesn't solve the access problem. You can improve the road in front of their property, but then you've got that next link that's still an issue. And so thinking about fire access and all that, that's where I think staff said you need to go beyond that to the intersection to improve that. But so what I'm hearing you saying is clarify, one, the number of units, and B, provide more specific direction on how would the applicant work with the city to improve that right away if it does need to be improved?
Something like that,
Yes.
because the way it is now looks a little extortion-y.
Okay.
I think that's not what we meant, so
Yep.
if we, thank you.
I will look in.
Thank you, John. Dr. Burrs, you good? Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. John, let's go back to the top. Ordinances on first reading. I'll let you catch your breath. And whenever you're ready, 6A.
slide looks weird. Okay. This is a request to rezone a portion of a property in Lookout Valley community from A1 agriculture and R1 residential zone to C2 RTZ and UGC commercial zone. This is part of the Black Creek Mountain development. This is phase 2. What you see there on your screen. Just to give you a little bit of background, I'm going to kind of jump ahead. We recently, if you recall, we did a rezoning on that far right side of the screen. Look at the center portion of that screen. That's the next section they're asking for rezoning for. Okay. The property is currently vacant and is surrounded by vacant land. There's some subdivision activity to the southeast, but it's predominantly vacant. Here you see the road being constructed up the mountain. The zoning, as you can see currently, is A1, R1 zoning. And you may recall a few months ago, we rezoned that first one, phase 1, to RTZ and UGC with a condition that limited land disturbance of any slope greater than 30% to no more than 2 acres in total. That was the condition that was adopted for that last piece. We did note as staff the importance, looking at the later phases, you had bigger portions of the site that contain important steep slopes and open space assets, that we needed some better language or an approach to how that would be protected. And so that kind of went through staff's filter as we reviewed the request. Again, this is the entire site plan that you see. Again, we're looking at the middle portion of the site plan. Here you're showing their proposed zoning in the northern and western sections. That light green is to RTZ. The middle red there you see would be to UGC, and the orange would be C2. And the reason I need the C2 for the orange is because it's a resort hotel facility, which they needed the C2 to accommodate. The plan recommendation for the site was low-density residential and open space residential. But it does say that, there's opportunities for kind of a planned development that looks at looking at both development and protection to go along with this area, because it is a huge area of land. So staff's findings was that basically that the development could be appropriate as long as we're protecting those steep slope and open space areas consistent with the plan recommendation. So we recommended a condition that's kind of a placeholder until a more specific map could be provided of no clearing or grading or land disturbance below the 1890 topo line. And that's a line that traces around the property that basically covers that escarpment on the backside to make sure that we're not doing any grading or clearing along that. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. The applicant at that time was generally fine with the staff recommendation, but wanted to amend it to the 1880 as opposed to the 1890 topo line, so basically dropped it down 10 feet to give them a little more flexibility. I know since that time, I think they've come back to say that still may not work for them because that 1880 topo wraps around the property, and there's some pieces, which I'll show you here, where it showed where the blue line is the 1880 topo line. And you can see, if you see where, I don't know if I can point, unfortunately you can't see my pointer on your screen, but you see that little finger in the lower left-hand side, that's one ravine that runs up into the site. You see the kind of, it works like a finger like that, and you can see where it wraps around. There's several little ravines that kind of intersect this development. The applicant was originally thinking, well, if we just suggest that front part of the 1880, that would be fine, but from staff's perspective, you've also got these other ravines that need to be clearly defined. And what I talked to the applicant about is giving us a open space protection plan very much similar to Hillock Farm. Councilman Smith, you remember that, where they kind of mapped the open spaces so that way everybody's clear about what's being protected. And they seemed amenable to that, so they're going to try to get me a map between now and next week that would define those other open spaces in development that would be protected. But it did come with a recommendation to approve with conditions from staff and Planning Commission.
Very good. Thank you, John. I don't see any lights, but I have a couple questions. Is the C2 section conditioned to the resort use only?
I don't
Or is
think
it
that was
left
part
wide
of the
open?
conditions of Planning Commission, so that's something you all might want to look at. That's
Yep.
probably a good idea.
Number two, are you going to add, do you think we're going to need to add it as an amendment, the new site map? outlining
Yes,
the
it would
topo
be,
line.
yeah, we would recommend that as staff,
Okay.
that be added.
Okay, we'll talk with Councilman Henderson on that. Very good. I don't see any other lights, John, so we can
Okay.
move on. B, please.
All right. Give me 1 second. Okay, this is a request to rezone a piece of property along Dayton Boulevard, north of Red Bank, from C2 commercial and R4 special zone to C2 and R4. Essentially, they're removing the zoning lines, keeping the same zones, just rearranging them to accommodate a contractor's office with some outdoor storage. As you recall, we recently added a special permit for outdoor storage, which we'll also be looking as part of this agenda. Again, the address is 6246 Dayton Boulevard. It's located across from the Sheriff Annex Building. If you look at the land uses in this area, you got a contractor's business to the north. You do have a neighborhood to the east that borders this property. To the south, you have office, vacant, and multifamily residential. And to the west, you have that government, institutional, and commercial uses. If you look at the zoning, you can see a mix of zones. Again, you have C2, R4, R2, a mix of zones in the area. We have had some zoning history with this site. The property immediately to the north of this was rezoned from R4 to C2 in 1987. There was a request to rezone this to M1, but the motion failed from lack of a motion. So again, it wasn't a denial, it just failed from lack of a motion from City Council. This is the site plan of that property. It shows them using the existing building, which was like an athletic complex at one time. They're wanting to add some outdoor storage in the middle of the property, and then on the northern side of the property, construct another building, maintaining the same point of access. They're also showing a substantial buffer, a 50-foot buffer, on the eastern property abutting the adjoining residences. Looking at the Hickson North River plan, it recommends a medium business mix, so it does promote a mix of, let me make sure you read that to make sure. Convenience, neighborhood, commercial, office, and residential uses. Staff's review of this considered it was compatible with the zoning request, was compatible with the land use plan, because we're doing C2 and R4. It's compatible with adjacent land uses, so we didn't have any conditions or concerns, because we figured that special permit will pick up that. So we were fine with adjusting the zoning boundaries. And again, just a reminder, the zoning boundaries, what it does, if you look in the site plan, it basically makes the whole front portion C2 and preserves the back portion as R1.
Very good. Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, I think you just answered my question just now. But what portion is the C2 expanding, and how significantly, if it is?
Okay, if you see that dark blue,
Right.
and that little inset.
Over here to the right.
Yep.
Yep.
That's the one that's going from R4 to C2.
Okay, from that area right there, okay. And that has to take place in order for the special exception to pass?
I think just for the way they want to use the property. Because you look at the site plan, I think part of their storage would encroach into the R4, so they need it all to be C2 to accommodate their outdoor storage, as I understand it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilman. John, I'm seeing no other lights.
Okay.
If you want to roll on to C.
I will. Okay. All right, let me get my notes right. All right. This was actually a case that was deferred. I think there's a community meeting coming up next week. So we've already presented to council, so unless you guys need me to cover some additional information, I'd be happy to move ahead.
All right. We'll skip it, John. D, please.
All right. Let me get my notes right. Okay, this is a request for, wait a minute, that's not right. Here we go. This is a request to rezone a property from O1 office zone to C2 convenience commercial zone to basically to accommodate a potential commercial use. This was deferred at the April PC meeting. To give you a general locational reference, if you're familiar with the Graysville Road intersection, this is just east of that at 1106 Greens Road, so it does have some frontage on East Brainerd Road. If you look at the land uses in the area, it does have some adjacent residential to the north, west and east. But if you look at the zoning map, might tell you a little different story. There are some commercial zones to the east and west of this property. They do have some restrictions. These properties, just to give you a little history, like the one immediately abutting to the east was rezoned to C2 with the condition of limiting to use as a coffee shop or office use only. So while there are some C2 zones, they usually were provided with some kind of conditions. So staff, in looking at this, let me go back to my, here's the site plan. I'm sorry, jumping around here on you guys. It shows you using existing site plan, using existing building with parking in front, with access coming on Greens Road. The plan recommendation for this location was office. So staff, in looking at this, the original request for C2, again, we always look at the zone and what that means, and try to always defer to the plan. So we recommend denial simply to defer to the plan support for office use. However, we also understand that there have been some zoning changes in the past that begin to change that. Typically what we do as staff, until there's a certain number of cases, we defer back to the plan and let Planning Commission and council weigh on these when we're starting to get to where there's a policy shift. So staff recommended to deny in this case. At Planning Commission, after the deferral, I believe Councilman Ledford had some meetings with the applicants to work on some conditions, basically to limit it to C5, which is actually even more restrictive than C2, with some conditions to ensure compatibility with residential. And you see those conditions outlined in front of you there, 1 through 5. 1 being no dumpster or trash service, retain the use of the existing structure. Limiting, you see 3 addresses the sign and size and lighting limitations. 4 addresses the driveway and parking, again, ensuring there's not going to pave the entire yard, keep it to more of a residential character, and no additional curb cuts on East Brainerd Road. So Planning Commission recommended to approve C5 with those conditions.
Very good. John, this is in my district. I think you outlined all the work that was done on this. I appreciate the applicant working with me. This is a very important commuter corridor for the East Brainerd area, and I'm very, very happy with the outcome of this. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to E.
All right. This is a request. Let me get my notes right again. Yeah, to rezone from M3 warehouse and wholesale zone to R3 zone, and R3, I'm sorry, to M2 light industrial for a gas regulator station. So think of this as a utility type operation. Just show you a picture of what that looks like so you can get an idea in your head. That's kind of what we're talking about. Essentially, it'd be a set of pipes that allows for the utility company to monitor, keep maintenance on the gas lines that service the community. So that's the request is for. If you look at the uses in the area, north you have single-family residential. To the east you have office and commercial. You also have commercial and multi-unit residential to the south and west. So you got a mix of uses in this location. Look at the zoning, it's also mixed. You've got the site itself, which is zoned M3, and then you got to the west C2, across the street C2, across the street also R3 zones. So you have a mix of zones in this location. Again, this is another example where staff, and looking at the, let me go to the plan, defers to the plan. The plan recommends neighborhood commercial, which is more of a light type, usually it's a C5 type zone. So given that the plan was recommending something in terms of the zone type, not an M3, staff recommended to deny. However, at Planning Commission, there was no opposition. I think after hearing from the applicant clarified that it will be used just for essentially a gas monitoring only. Planning Commission felt comfortable with approving the M3 subject to 2 conditions. 1, that the existing warehouse buildings would be demolished, I guess because there's maybe a visual blight that they would like to see those, I guess, go down. And 2nd, that the use would be limited to gas metering and gas control only. So those are the 2 conditions that Planning Commission recommended.
Very good. Thanks, John. Councilman Gilbert, you're on.
John, probably want to add some more conditions to that. One, let me make a statement. I don't know if this young lady can answer it or not, but my understanding that this is going to help the area because it reduces the pressure that we currently have, and it make it lower, so it may make it safer.
This will be a gas regulator station, so the large, high-pressure pipelines that come through, this will be the station that regulates the pressure when it goes out to the smaller pipes that services the community. And then it will also be an inspection station, and rather than having to go out and dig up areas of pipe to inspect the pipes, they'll be able to put what they call a pig inside this launcher, and then they can inspect the lines from inside rather than having to dig them up outside.
Okay. One other thing I was going to put on there, the fencing is going to be where you cannot see in,
Yes, there will be slats in the fencing.
and we're going to remove both buildings on this property.
Yes.
I asked earlier, but he couldn't answer the question for his dumpster. Is there going to be any dumpster there?
There will be no dumpster.
Okay, and lighting is just going to be the lighting inside the area where they're going to work at and not in the community?
Yes, and it will only be illuminated when they're working, not every day.
And the buffer will still remain there, correct, in the very back?
Yes.
Okay, and that the greenery around it will look more nicer what it currently looks for as pleasant?
Yes, it'll be grass and shrubbery and things of that nature.
Okay, all right, appreciate it.
At least, from my understanding, some adjacent property has some similar type
I
landscaping.
think
It
it's,
will be
yeah, right across
at
the
least-
street.
At least that to that level, if not
Okay.
better.
And where's the driveway gonna be? I can't remember.
I'm sorry?
Where's the driveway going into the facility?
Yeah, it's still accessing by Bonnie Oaks. There will be, I believe, a dirt driveway that comes off of,
Kind of hard to see here.
yes.
You see that line in the lower left? That's the existing curb cut they're going to use.
So
Right.
this driveway is not gonna be asphalt, you're gonna have a dirt driveway?
Yes, I believe that's just to access the rear of the property.
Ask them to put an asphalt, see can they put an asphalt in there also, or not just dirt?
Okay, and that was just based on my review of the site, the updated site plan that I emailed you earlier. I will
Yes.
confirm that's going to be the case. And I know there are some restrictions on how much property can be impervious.
Gotcha, for stormwater.
Right,
I appreciate it. You have that information by next week, correct?
absolutely.
All right, or you can give it to me later on this week, I appreciate it.
Okay, and should I email that to you?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Very good. Councilman, are you good? Sounds like you covered your bases.
I'm good.
All right, good, sir. John, we've covered F, so let's move on to G.
Okay. Let's see, my notes right. Okay. This is a request to rezone a property at 2005, 2007, and 2009 Milne Street from R1 residential zone to R2 residential zone in order for 3 parcels to be eligible to participate in the City of Chattanooga's owner-occupied duplex program. If you look at the uses on this site, the current site, it already had, those are existing abandoned duplexes. There are also several other duplexes on this block. There are also a few single-family, though I would say the predominant use on this block is duplexes, or at least as far as structures go. Again, you can see here, looking at the site and some of the homes adjacent to the property in the 2000 block of Milne Street. Currently, the zoning of this entire area is R1. That was part of the down zoning, which I'm going to speak to in a moment. That downzoned large portions of Avondale and other communities to R1. Which is noted here in this slide, so I'll jump ahead. The Avondale Land Use Plan recommends single-family residential for this location. One of the things I wanted to note, and you'll see with this case, another case, because there's several mass rezonings that took place, particularly in Avondale. We knew that the overall goal was to align the zoning with the vision of the plan, but also that we knew that to try to address the imbalance where you had large stretches of the community that were zoned R2 that did not need to be zoned R2. Was also, if you look at that third bullet, We knew that after this major downzoning, that on an individual case-by-case basis, that some properties could be appropriate, particularly if already built as a duplex, to be rezoned back on a property-by-property basis. So staff, looking at this, basically knowing that more than half the block is already developed as duplexes, and that this program is intended to actually promote reoccupation of duplexes as owner-occupied, but allow the person to rent the adjacent residential unit, which meets affordable housing goals. Staff recommend to approve. There was opposition present. I believe a resident who lived on this block had some concerns about traffic, and the city had done a number of community meetings, met with the president of the area, had some news blitzes. A resident stated that she was not aware that this was happening. But after hearing from the opposition, the individual who's in opposition to this, I will say there were members of the association that were there in support of the project as well. But after hearing all that, Planning Commission recommended to approve. So it comes with you, recommendation approved from staff and Planning Commission.
Very good. I don't see Councilman Byrd here. So, John, I'm going to go ahead and I have no other lights. Going to move on to H.
Okay? Okay, this is a request to rezone from R1 residential to R2 residential zone in order to bring another property back into compliance as a duplex. It's already built as a duplex. This is located at 800 Moss Street near the Shalford Road intersection of Moss and Shalford. As I mentioned before, it's already a vacant duplex. There are some other duplexes on this area, not as many as in the prior case, but there are a couple other duplexes in this location. There's also single-family detached residential. I think it's important to note that this property is on a corner, so it's not in the middle of the block, but on the corner and adjacent to Shalford Road. Here you can see the site, upper left-hand corner, you see the existing duplex. You can see the view going down Moss Street. You see the lower left is a house across Moss and then another adjacent house. So you kind of get a feel for the character of the area. If you look at the zoning, it's predominantly R1. There is an R3 across the street on the other side of Shalford Road. There is no recent zoning history in this location. Again, the site plan submitted shows that they're planning on reusing the existing duplex and the existing drive off of Moss Street. The land use plan, Eastdale plan adopted in 1998 recommends low-density residential. So that would not include a duplex, clearly. So staff, took several factors into consideration. They look at the plan, however, it is very old. We looked at the land use mix of that area, as well as its location relative to Shalford and Moss Street being on a corner. And taking all those factors into consideration, including the need for more housing options, staff recommend approve with conditions. No vehicular access shall be permitted on Shalford Road, and the use of existing driveways only.
Very good. Thank you, John.
Now,
Council-
just real quickly, there was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission concurred with staff with the same conditions.
Thank you, John. Councilwoman Coonrod, comments?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually excited that we're converting this, allowing them to transform this back to the duplex. I think it's needed. It's been vacant and an eyesore in District 9 for quite some time. And hearing from constituents across the city of Chattanooga that we need more housing, low-income housing, affordable housing, a variety of different type housings. So I most definitely am supportive of this, and hopefully in the future that we can take a look at other housing options for District 9 to be upzoned and duplexes can be utilized in my district. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilwoman. John, we've got one more ordinance.
Yes, this is another one. This is again in Avondale, different block. It's in Arlington Street. Request to rezone from R1 to R2 to basically occupy an existing duplex structure. If you look at this particular block, there's not as many duplexes on this block as the other case. I think there's one other duplex. The rest of the homes on the block are single family. Here you can see the site with the duplex in the upper left. You see some of the adjacent homes. There is a school across property, so it's got a mix of institutional, residential, and again, one other duplex. The zoning is, again, predominantly R1. Just as a reminder, this is the same area that was subject to the same zoning study that had the same clarification, so I won't restate those. They're showing the site plan, again, showing using the existing structure with parking in front. The adopted land use plan recommends single-family residential at the time. This is the same set of elements that I covered last time, so I won't restate those. So staff felt like this request, like the other one, was appropriate because it's, again, we're rezoning an existing duplex. We're not converting a single family to a duplex or rezoning a vacant piece of property. This is an existing duplex. It's been vacant for quite a period of time. So staff recommended to approve. At Planning Commission, there was opposition. There was some concern from the neighborhood. I think there are stakeholders in the Avondale community that would like to make a distinction between this particular case and the city's duplex reoccupation program. So they'd probably be speaking to that at City Council next week. But staff, again, we're looking at strictly through a land use lens, and from a structure and a use, and the duplex in the other block is the same situation here, where you've got an existing structure that's designed as a duplex that's been vacant for quite some time. So we recommend to approve, as well as Planning Commission.
Very good. Thanks, John. Councilwoman, any same comments?
Yeah, this district, well, I share part of Avondale with Councilman Byrd, and I think that often goes unnoticed, even when they're working on plans to create affordable housing opportunities. Even with this duplex ownership program that we have, that I have yet to be included in that, and I have a substantial amount of duplexes in Avondale that's in District 9. And I think this vote tonight is gonna upset a few folks, but it needs to most definitely be done because we need to have people to be able to be in housing that's livable. This, the picture actually takes away from how the property actually looks. I wish you had a recent picture of today of how it looks, and it's been an eyesore for quite some time. And we have a number of properties that look exactly like this that have been unkept and not utilized at all, but yet we hear the cries about housing. So yeah, again, hey, I appreciate the approval on your end, and we're gonna move forward tonight with it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. John, we've got one
Yeah, I
resolution.
got special permit.
Special exceptions permit.
Yeah, and I won't give a name to it. But a special permit
I wonder
for.
who it's for.
Yeah, that's right. But this is actually, I think, a good situation where, sometimes you've got things you want to be able to prove on a case-by-case basis, but not carte blanche.
Every day.
That's right. So this is the special permit tool for a contractor's office that does have some criteria that need to be addressed before you would approve it. And let me just kind of jump to those three basic elements that we're looking at. One is the potential impact of that use on any adjacent residential or non-commercial properties. Two, how similar is it with existing businesses in the area? And three, how does it conform with the adopted plan? So we looked at those three factors. They did provide a number of information about how many employees, number of shifts, the hours, and so forth. Staff, basically to kind of get to the conclusion, felt like it was generally appropriate with some restrictions, because we want to protect the residences to the rear, but also ensure that there are some limits in terms of the operations of the facility, so it continues to be a good neighbor. So let me go to the conditions. So the conditions are essentially four. One, no land disturbance, clearing of trees, or manufacturing equipment shall be permitted within that 50-foot buffer that you saw on the site plan. Two, retain the existing dumpster along the northern property line. Three, hours of operation limit from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Sunday, and no on-site vehicle repair. At Planning Commission, there was opposition, I'm sorry. The opposition was one individual who still had some concerns about, how things would be enforced after it's approved. And so stated those concerns. After hearing from the applicant, opposition, and staff, Planning Commission generally concurred with staff's recommendation except for the dumpster condition. That was modified to say retain the existing dumpster 150 feet from the eastern property line and dumpster activity limited to the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So it comes with a recommendation approved from staff and PC with conditions.
Very good. Thank you, John. Councilman?
That's good to me.
Fantastic. Give us an update, John.
Update. Well, we had a budget session this morning.
And that went fantastic.
That was
Great
a lot of
job.
fun.
Great job.
No, seriously, I will say on the steep slope floodplain, that's moving along. You should be hearing from Brian in the next couple of weeks. We're going to try to schedule some district meetings. We've got one more kind of walkthrough to go through the presentation, which he will also be going through each of you all individually, so you kind of get a feel for what we'll be sharing. I just want to give kudos both to the LDO staff team, the Public Works Engineering Department, as well as UTC. It's really been a team effort in addition to my research analysis team. I think you'll be impressed with the amount of information that we pulled together that really kind of gives a more complete view of where the specific challenges are. And that's what we want to do is, I always say half the battle is defining the problem before you get to the solution. So hopefully that'll provide some clarity. And, again, just so you know, those public meetings on the steep slope floodplain will be about framing the issue, not the tools yet. Once we've sort of framed the issue, we'll begin working on some tool options. So that's moving along. Area 3 plan, we should be having some community meetings toward the end of June. So I actually have a meeting with my staff this week to identify when those dates would be. So I'll be letting you know about that as soon as I hear from them. As you know, those other area plans will be kicking off toward the end of this summer, early fall. Anything else? Oh, the airport district plan, that's another one we're trying to wrap up. We're in the process of reviewing the consultant draft. So once we are satisfied with that, we'll have our community meeting to wrap that one up. So that's kind of the big three.
Very good. You got a lot on your plate.
Yep.
That's for sure. Again, as I do after each Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, I want to say thank you to everyone who's working on that committee for giving their time and their talents, because I think we're going to come up with a very comprehensive plan and not a one-size-fits-all. But we've got issues that we're dealing with all over the city, different issues in different areas, and I think it's a great way to look at it. So I look forward to the results of that committee.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, John. Anybody else on this council that needs to bring anything before us? With such excitement, I will adjourn us till 6. Thank you, Councilman Henderson, for joining us. Yeah.